members will talk about their decisions.
I think we just wanted to start by saying that there is an amazing amount of really, really excellent work on the walls here. It's very, very impressive. I think if you pinned up today and you're in this show, you should give yourself a pat on the back and a round of applause for everyone that's made our task really difficult, and we've deliberated for very long, much longer than we were supposed to.
Yes, thank you for your patience, and that is why it spoke to the quality of the work that it took us that long.
So we have 6 honorable mentions, and 1 runner-up, and 1 best of show. So we used a criteria as we went around reviewing each project. There were 4 items. The first one was the cold, hard, on-the-wall grade. So not knowing you, not knowing your studio, not knowing your professor, just looking at the work on the wall and saying, is this, A quality, A+ quality work? And we were really blown away. It was amazing. The next criteria was architecture, sort of spatial implications of the work that we were seeing. So is this, what is the experience of these spaces? When you are occupying these buildings, what would you feel? The third one was feasibility and believability. So is the, Cal Poly has a reputation for being a very sort of producing architects that can build things. So that was one of the criteria. And the fourth was passion. So how much passion was expressed in the presentation, and also what passion was visible on the wall, and the amount of work and the quality of work that was produced. So those were the criteria. We had a little grading matrix we went through. It was so difficult. Hand you over. I'm going to talk about the first sort of honorable mention.
Okay, so maybe should I announce what it is first, or say why it was given the honorable mention and then say which one? Okay, excellent, very good. Okay, so the first project that we'll talk about is one that we thought showed a lot of rigor in the process, showed a very kind of strong development from earlier kind of models and iterations on the project through what we saw as the final result, and also was quite successful in terms of being kind of forward-thinking in terms of having an architecture that really looked at how what was happening inside the building could kind of communicate with the public and vice versa, and designed a kind of infrastructure and architecture for that to occur. So the first runner-up is Ants and Agents.
So I think this honorable mention, we were really impressed by the approach that the student took. It was not an easy brief. I've actually never heard of a brief that includes all of the lungs, howling, and it was very sort of, there was a lot of optimism, sort of appling a real sort of, generosity of approach. And some of the details were quite believable, and the jumpsuit was amazing. So, optimism gets an honorable mention.
So the next honorable mention is one that, again, a lot of it I think came down to process in terms of what we really appreciated about this particular one. I think it was a project that started very much with thinking about the structure and the kind of tectonics of the building as the starting point, and then was very successfully able to translate from looking at structural systems into an architecture that had a kind of believable quality and spatial experience, and also dealt quite successfully with a kind of push and pull between community, the context, potential resistance from people in the community and the site itself. And so the next honorable mention is Security Cloud.
This project, the overall process that was shown on the wall was really remarkable. It was something that the student didn't have a lot of time to discuss during the presentation, but we were really impressed when we went back and looked through some of the sketches and some of the design elements that were there. The building was flexible, and it made a community space that was believable. The models that were produced were really pleasing, sort of lovely objects. And so the next honorable mention goes to hard drive of the city.
So, again, for each of you, realizing literally the power of design and the ability to affect community, to have impact, is a phenomenal thing. We as architects have an ability to reach to the core of people's souls at times in the work that we produce that can actually transform lives. And in this particular project, if there was a humanitarian award, so to speak, this project speaks to believability in the budget. It works well for the actual spaces. It literally addresses the issue of spatial implications and the potential of the experience for them, but it also reaches a little bit beyond, and it speaks to the economy and actually creating a scenario in which that economy could be galvanized. So for that, we have an honorable mention for the Paradise Health and Innovations. In a similar instance, speaking again towards the idea of the power of design and being able to have great and phenomenal impact on community, we have another project that hits the idea of social justice and the impact that it could potentially have. And so as we look at urban participant, we give another honorable mention for the work that is done there. We do, I want to, in both of these instances, encourage both groups, and especially in this case, urban participant, the stories that you begin to tell about people are really what drive others to begin to participate economically, volunteering, and every other spectrum you can think of when they can relate. And you guys did a phenomenal job of presenting it as like your brothers and sisters or something. The one aspect of the project that kind of, for us, was a bit troubling was the fact that we know the history of a lot of housing and what happens, and so the tower piece of it became a struggle in our minds in terms of the feasibility part. But this was a wonderful effort. So, without any other further ado, the honorable mention for urban participation. Accompanied by a book, Architecture of the Central Coast. All right, so the runner-up. So with this project, there were a number of things that grabbed our attention, from the ability to represent tectonics, the feasibility of that, the spatial implications of what was happening, actually using obstacles and overcoming them in order to create something that, in many cases, stretched the limits of creativity and thinking in order to produce something that was really fantastical in nature. And so the runner-up is Rendezvous.
All right, so this is what everybody's been waiting for. As was expressed earlier, I mean, the work here is incredible. So finding a best of show is incredibly difficult. I think the project that we decided upon has all the boxes checked for what we had kind of outlined earlier. And so from form generation to execution to the extent of work, it was pretty incredible. So I don't know if we all want to speak on this project specifically. It really doesn't make a difference for me, but yeah, attention, yeah. And so this one time, no, just kidding. I think everybody on this panel was thoroughly impressed with the execution on it, and you know, there's definitely a bright future ahead.
There was definitely an understanding from the young designer's point of view of understanding, again, spatial implications and the tectonics, the differentiation and the clear articulation of the renderings as well as the model that showed the understanding of those spatial implications, understanding that moving from one space to the other, and very larger parts of a model from the community moving on to, I'm trying to think of words to not give this away, community to the other parts of the model, I'll just say, that actually had a different feeling to it and quality to it.
Yeah, so I think I'll sort of second what you two have said, and beyond that, there was also a kind of clear thought about how the architecture related to a larger program and the city beyond it, and the impact of the community.
I think it's hard to add much to that. Just it was really one of the things we were using to sort of grade was just what the work looked like on the wall without any sort of author to defend. And I think we were all really taken that this work stood on its own, that it was proper architecture there by itself on the wall. So very impressive.
Alrighty, so best of show is going to go to Interlace.
We're going to open it up to if you have any questions or if our reviewers have any additional comments. We'll have a brief discussion session.
Maybe we can start with questions because you've heard a lot from us already. We'd love to hear from all of you.
Any questions?
I don't have a question, but I wanted to say thank you for reviewing us, and I think you guys really made an effort to understand the project and us presenting, and it was really nice to present to you. So thank you.
Thank you. Any questions?
I can just talk loud.
Okay.
You guys heard a lot of different presentations today about many different types of projects. Was there anything that really stood out to you in any of these presentations that, whether it be clarifying a project or just made you really understand what they were talking about?
We actually had a little bit of discussion over just strictly the presentation. And there was one project specifically where the coordination of that presentation really did impact our decision to include it. I mean, it didn't hit everything that we were looking for, but the passion that went into that presentation really was an aspect that triggered conversation. And so without the passion, we may have grazed over it. But I think that was a huge aspect to the project. So congrats to that aspect.
One of the things that some projects didn't have and others did was process. So description of the sketches that people were doing or the way models were made and iterated to come up with a final model was something that was really powerful to see. And I think some of the Paradise projects actually, there was a huge community outreach or engagement process that in that little book, there were certain some images, photographs of that, but it would have been nice to see that more, because it was such a big part of grappling with that design was sort of engaging with the community, and that's it's difficult to show, but it would be nice to have seen that process.
I think, maybe another aspect of it is that, in particular in this type of situation where you have a very limited amount of time to speak, that the things that you're showing us, everything that you put on the wall or, the models that you put in front of your presentation, that as much as possible, I think that the more successful projects had different types of representation that were giving us different information about the project, so that as a kind of cohesive set, they gave us a very well-rounded picture of your intentions, of your motivations, and the kind of resulting spaces. And so I think as much as you can think about, what does this 3D printed model communicate about my project as opposed to this detailed wall section or this rendered view, and being really intentional about making sure that you're sharing as much information as you can through the different means that you're using.
Yeah, that was a great way to sum it up. Literally, what you're showing to us, architecture is really, in terms of the client-architect relationship, is really about communication. And even between the architect and contractor, it's about communication. Can they build what we have envisioned, and how do we make that something that is legible for them? So we're not only communicating verbally, but we're communicating visually and graphically. And so those of you who didn't have floor plans perhaps on your boards, and maybe that was okay from whatever class you were in, whatever studio, think about what that means too, right? In certain scenarios, does that make it believable in terms of your understanding, and do you understand what it is that you've designed? Not that you need to have every single floor plan, but what does that imply? What does it imply when you have a section? You're communicating something to us, and why? If you choose to add a drawing, leave out a drawing, whatever that thing is that you're making a statement by not having, just like you're making a statement by how you have it, what size and scale, contrast, how powerful is it in your actual board. And then of course your verbal presentation can add to that thing. Any other questions? Yes.
In terms of design or events like that, I think one of the things that makes Cal Poly very different from other institutions is its diversity in the program. We have studios that they are super abstract, no context, in the planet of zero or no planet, or studios that they're super realistic, work with the community, real project, work with the details. So the diversity is very broad compared to some other institutions. And I believe the committee tried to bring you guys with a kind of like a more diverse background to be able to understand different projects from different spectrums and judge them. So the question I have is, in terms of student population, when we see some projects get more feedback or more attention, regardless of the approach to the design or approach to the conceptualization, how we can get something out of this event to understand what is the better approach, to have a very general, broad approach to the design, which is gonna lose the quality of intentions and that intensity of understanding the problem and having that force and to come up with new ideas or solutions, or to have something like a lowering tone, but more appealing to the broader population.
Can you very briefly summarize exactly what the question is? Sorry.
So the question is,
We heard a lot today.
what should students do or take out of this event as a learning opportunity?
So, since I'm not a faculty here, and I just want to speak to this in a sort of, in that diverse scenario that you said, I think that you guys, looking from the outside, you guys, I hope you realize that because you have such diverse thought processes in these studios, if you are actually allowing that to happen in every year, where you get some professor who does very, very abstract things, to someone who's very, very concrete and technical, and they want, very precise things. I can think of so many instances of my 15, 16 years of work where all of that, from the abstract to the very technical, are so essential for your success as an architect. Again, I could tell you war stories all day long, but to be able to, whether you're in a very abstract scenario and the program is changing every day on you, we were working on Willis Tower, and literally a new CEO came in, had to do the whole millions of dollars of design work over in a very short period of time. It happens. On the other end of the spectrum, the very, very low budget, how can you revamp the community? That's reality. And so I hope that you guys are highly appreciative of the education that you're receiving here, because that diversity of the professors and what interests them and how they implement it into your different studios, it really is going to prepare you for great success in being able to be flexible, agile, creative in a number of instances that you probably can't even imagine now.
I think, to add to those points, of what I've found through a lot of my educational experience in a number of different places was that when you have a very diverse faculty and set of briefs that you might be dealing with throughout the course of your career, that generally the projects that are the most successful is where you find a really good balance between the particular kind of interests that are presented to you by the faculty member and the personal interests that you have as an individual person, right? That it's not the students who are able to most accurately kind of emulate the way of thinking and the kind of anticipated result of the person who's given them the brief, nor is it the student that just kind of goes their whole own way and thinks this is the way I want to approach this project, and I'm just going to ignore the way that it's been framed for me. But that the most successful students tend to be the ones who can bridge those together in a very kind of smart and an interesting way.
If I was a student, I was one of you guys, what I would do today is to just walk around and look at what's on the walls and just enjoy it. It's really some beautiful work, and if you were, depending on what studio you were in, you might not have had to make a building out of trash or design a tensegrity structure. And so use your imagination to understand what your projects would be like if that was your brief, if you had to make a brewery and monk habitat and all of those things over a river, like how, what can you learn from looking at this beautiful work that's on the walls?
So being a grad of Cal Poly, I came out of this program with a lot of diverse understanding of what architecture is, from the theoretical to the very obvious reality. And having now worked for a decade plus, architecture is always going to be a difficult challenge. What I see in this room, though, is something that I'm actually proud to say that I'm a graduate of Cal Poly, because this is incredible work. One of the things that I look for in projects when they're posted like this is it's more the comprehensive nature of the project. If it's showing me a tectonic detail that has an understanding of how that thing would actually get built, that's impressive to me. That means that you guys have gone beyond just theoretically throwing some structural elements on a page and saying, yep, that's how it's built. That means that you guys are actually doing the research necessary or getting the help that you need to then develop drawings that are realistic, that are gonna actually be implemented in the real world. Whereas, you know, graduates coming out of other schools, not naming any names, could realistically come into an office and say, yep, I know how to draft, but they're totally worthless, you know? And so it's encouraging to see the product of work on the walls today and say, gosh, you know what? I could hire any one of these today. So, you know, you could all pat yourselves on the back because it's impressive.
All right, well, I think that's the end of it. So please join me in thanking Elizabeth, Jenna, Aaron, and Chris. This was a wonderful event. Thank you so much for being here. We appreciate your time and energy and all your comments. So thank you. Good luck on the finals and have a nice summer.